All right. So welcome, Raghunath. I am so excited to have you on. I am, as I mentioned to you on the phone, like actively resisting having a fangirl experience. And so, I mean, you're an international yoga teacher and spiritual teacher steeped in Bhakti and Krishna consciousness. Of course, you also teach a lot of asana and physical postures as well. You're a father, you're a musician, kirtan and punk rock, you're an ex-monk. You've just traveled all over the world and you have a book coming out.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask though, can you tell us just a little bit about your book?
Well, the book is, I was working on like how to take Bhakti philosophy and make it sort of like very, very accessible for anybody you meet on the street. So that was what I was working on, called the 6 Pillars of Bhakti. And my publisher was like, well, that's great. We're totally into it, but we want your story. I was like, well, I was never a drug addict. I was never in jail. He goes, you got a good story. We want your story. And they kept on pushing me and I kept on resisting. And I was like, you know what? All right, I'm going to write my story. And so I put the other one on hold and I just started telling my story. Oh. And, at first I was thinking, oh, I should do this with like a ghost. What do you call it? A ghostwriter? A ghostwriter. Mm-hmm. And because who's got the time to do this? But it was actually a really fun practice of appreciation. Because when you start, and I'm sure because you're a very spiritual person, but when you start to reflect on your spiritual path and your spiritual journey, and because I started from like childhood to not quite present, but you start to realize how like messengers have been sent to you all along the way. So the entire thing, my entire time I was writing, I was like, wow, that was a magical time. That was a magical meeting. That was an incredible realization I got at 7 years old. That was incredible. And you realize actually your whole life has always been steered by spirit. We just don't like opt in to listen. But when you can zoom out and see your whole life and look back on it with that spiritual vision, you can realize, yeah, for sure. I've been like looked after. I was never abandoned. Even my roughest times, I wasn't abandoned. There was a reason I went through that. That was exactly what I needed, whether it be a heartbreak or loss of money or got robbed or got some injury, some chronic sickness or whatever it was. Like that was exactly what I needed at that time. And when you're in the thick of the thing, you can't even tell. But when you step away from it and at a different vantage point, you're like, oh my God, I couldn't see it then. And when I pieced this all together in a memoir, I was like, wow, that was sort of magic. Wow. And I think everybody's got that magic as well, but we have to step back from ourselves and then we have to put on our spiritual goggles to really see it. Or else we live in a world of, that was a good day, that was a bad day. That was a great time, that was a bad time. That was a great relationship and that was a failure. Oh, I want to undo that one. I want to undo that one. I wish I would have stayed there. And it just becomes a world of that. And that's a material vision where it's sort of, it's a bitterness of why didn't I do that? What a bad choice. I should have bought the property. I missed it. I missed Bitcoins, whatever it is. Yeah. Stuff like that. A world of regret and lamentation. And those were the good old days and stuff like that. So it was a great spiritual practice to write the memoir. Actually, I feel really good about it. And it was a peculiar story. I was a punk rock and then I was a punk rock. And then I quit it. I went to India, became a monk. And then I decided to start a spiritual punk rock band in the ashram with other monks. And that band got exponentially bigger than the first band. And I had to tour like a monk, like a celibate monk that wouldn't eat at restaurants. We cooked our own food wherever we went, stay up all night. We'd wake up, because we were playing a gig. So we'd stay up after midnight and do our morning meditation. Then we'd sleep, and then we'd refuel ourselves by going to India and immerse ourselves in simple villages in India at holy places. And it was just like a crazy journey.
Yeah, it's so funny. I was actually listening to you talk about that experience the other day on one of the podcasts. I forgot to mention that you were a podcast host of my favorite podcast, Wisdom of the Sages, you and Kaustubha Das.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. And so, I mean, for the people listening, I know they're already just totally captured by your words. And so if you want to hear Raghunath speak every day, He does a daily yoga podcast with some of the sages, which you should definitely check out. But anyway, I was listening to it the other day on my walk, and you were recollecting on the times as a monk in the rock band, and you like cleaning other people's houses. Like you'd stay and like cook for them and offer them prasad and like clean their house.
Yeah, we'd go on tours, and sometimes the promoter, which back then in that music scene was a bunch of kids our age, would say, yeah, well, why don't you just stay with us? We're like, oh, sure. So instead of like the classic rock and roll, we trash the place, we would clean the place. We would clean the place. We would, we were all, because Bhakti culture, you're into cooking. So you set up a big pot of rice, a big pot of dal, you make a vegetable curried preparation, you put it on an altar, you offer it to God. And then we invited like, half the, a few hundred people to this person's house from the performance. And then I give a class and we have kirtan, and then we serve out a big feast. And we did that all over America. Yeah. I mean, we did that all over Sweden. We've done it all over Europe, in Italy. And, that was just sort of like part of our business as usual. I'm at my mom's house right now. She's 95 years old and visiting in New York. But the band used to stay and practice at her house. And every day we just make these massive feasts and invite people over. And it was one magical, it's when you step into the world of spirituality, I'm convinced that everybody's life is very magical, but we don't opt into it, and therefore it becomes sort of mundane and routine. And we start to think, this is just humdrum. Why am I doing what I'm doing? I'm busy doing nothing. But the spirit is magical, quite magical, because the spiritual realm when I say magical, it means something like it's something extraordinary that we don't even notice. And then when we sort of opt into what we are, which is, I'm not an Italian American New Yorker. I'm a pure spirit soul that's covered by illusion, and I'm trying to get out of it. But I see myself as not a white person or a black person or a male or what my sexual preference is or what my political party at. That's all got to do with our vehicle and our mind. It's got nothing to do with us. What we are is a pure spirit soul. And once I claim that as my identity, I find magic starts to happen. And I think a lot of you guys who listen to this podcast can sort of get that already. And it's especially cool because it's an astrology podcast. So once you accept astrology, especially the Jyotish, you're accepting that, yeah, this concept of you as Christine Rodriguez and me as Raghunath, this is one page of a massive encyclopedia of existences we've had. And this is a so-called identity. In the same way, I'm going to LA and I'm going to rent a car. And due to some foolishness, I get attached to the Mustang convertible I'm renting. But I'm not a Mustang. It's just a rental. Why so proud? Why so arrogant about it? Why make that your identity? You're not a car. It's a rental vehicle. This body that we know as Christine and Raghunath, they're just rentals for a few decades. We have this form. We come out of ignorance. We come completely convinced that this is me. But when you study a Jyotish, you realize, oh, I get it. Everything I've got in this life, there's some radical responsibility I have if I start complaining about what I got, because I've got what I've got due to some actions in some previous incarnation of myself. And that's what I got. Did you listen to the Reincarnation episode the other day?
I did, yeah.
Did you like it?
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, it is so uncanny. If those who aren't, do you mind if I just share about it for a second?
Yeah, please.
So again, this is our podcast, Wisdom of the Sages, and we go through one of the sacred literatures of India, the Srimad Bhagavatam, which has 18,000 verses. So it's a whole life's work, and it's considered the cream of the crop of yoga philosophy. That's why we call it a yoga podcast. It's not because we teach people how to do up dog and down dog. We teach the roots of yoga philosophy, highlighted in Bhakti. So one of the episodes we had was on reincarnation, and there's all these. There was a professor at the University of Virginia, and there's Ian Stevenson in the 50s, and he has this continuing group of scientists who are funded, and they trying to figure out all these anomalies. And the anomalies are not that, Raghunath says, oh yeah, in my last life, I was a partridge. In my last life, I was a swan. In the last life, I was the Queen of England. Not stuff like that. Right. Weird, peculiar, if not creepy, verifiable things.
Mhm.
A 2-year-old is talking about how they died at the World Trade Center.
Mhm.
And he's explaining in great detail what it was like, how a plane hit the building. He's drawing pictures in class of a building crumbling. And he's, uncanny anomalies that their parents, their child therapists cannot explain, how these kids are giving so much detail. I was reading one, if you go to carolbowman.com, she sort of took over where Dr. Ian Stevenson left off, and she's got an incredible message board about where people write in. And they generally, it's people who are like, look, I don't believe in reincarnation, but my 3-year-old is saying things that I don't know where he's getting this from. And one was like, he insisted he's in the Navy. And he's like the Navy, and we work on boats, we work on pipes. And he's like a 3-year-old. They don't know where he's getting this stuff. He's stationed in Hawaii. He got bit by bit by a snake or something like that. And then he died in a horrible shark attack. And it was out of, and they find that what manifests in anxiety disorders are often these young children who've had some traumatic death. And generally, it's those who've died a traumatic death. They can still recall their past life, generally from the ages 4 and younger.
Wow.
Because they're still connected deeply. And so then we just say, oh, that's not real. That's just, everything's going to be fine. And we try to placate them. I'm your mother. I'm your father. A lot of kids will say, and I've had a yoga student say this to me. She's like, this makes so much sense. My 3-year-old insists I'm not her real mother. She has another mother. Sometimes she escapes and tries to get home. And she says, I want to find my real family. I miss my real family. And so it's not every child, but it's some children. And they don't just say random things. It's things that one lady on the Netflix documentary, Surviving Death, episode 6, really good. You will see that. It's the child talks about how he died, and gives him, the mother, the name of the parents and his name, and she Google searches it, and boom, she's finding a child was murdered, and the child is explaining the park that he played at. And I'm a card carrying believer in reincarnation, but when you read these testimonies, it's like, oh my God, this is really real. This is really, 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 really real.
Yes.
So
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just saying. So it goes hand in hand with the Jyotish. It really, I find it incredibly interesting. At the same time, with Western therapy, where you got some issues dating men, or issues dating women, or issues with some fear and anxiety, a good Western therapist is going to take you back to a place of trauma. Hey, where was your father when you were growing up? Or, what was your home situation like? It's important to sort of understand the past a little. And that's why I like Jyotish. What I find problematic with both Western therapy and people who just get into astrology just to hear about the past was the past also has to be buried and forgiven, just so we can get on with our future. It's not what happened to us. It's what we're doing with what happened to us. So I think it's a beautiful combination between therapy and understanding where you're coming from, both in this life and your previous lives, and how to unpack that, forgive it, and move forward, which is a big part of our healing. So I appreciate what you're doing, and I appreciate you popularizing it on podcasts. I've always secretly loved it and never talked about it much until our podcast.
It's so funny because when I first met you, I had to have been 20. It's possible I was 19. I was 19 or 20. And I remember walking up to you and being like, will you tell me your birthday? And you looked at me like really like with a skeptic look, and you're like, and then you told me your birthday. And I had that interaction because I was studying Jyotish back then, and I kind of wanted a little bit of insight. And it was just funny because
I thought you were going to just give me a present. That's what I was thinking.
No. And so it's interesting. And I'm so glad to know that you are interested in Jyotish. And now in hindsight, it's like, of course you are, because you study the Vedas and you're so steeped in Vedic wisdom. And because Vedic astrology is a limb of the Vedas, you're going to have the intersection of it, of course. And what we were talking about with the karma And two of the questions I wanted to talk to you about, I did want to talk about karma, which I feel like we were moving into already. And I also wanted to talk about free will versus fate and your thoughts on that, because with Vedic astrology, it's like we are looking at a blueprint of our karmic makeup in this life, the things that we're meant to experience and the things that we're meant to witness. And
it's it can be quite chilling. I like
100%.
in 1991 was the first time I got my chart done, and this was like reading my autobiography and my future. The chart knew too much about me.
Yeah.
I was like, how the heck can it know this? And it's incredibly accurate, and it's not looked at as some weird novel pseudoscience, especially
Right.
in the cultured parts of India. It's looked at as, this is how we marry our children. This is how we pick auspicious dates to get married, to conceive a child, to have a special event, to have the stone laying of our temple. It's tied into procuring good karma for future things. And that's what your story about your question about fate and free will is. We are creating our karma by what I do today. So I can do this podcast, for example, and I can just say horrible things, put out horrible message, and that's going to affect everybody that hears it. It'll be an inauspicious and affect people in a V karmic way, an inauspicious way. Or I can put out positive things. So every activity I do today is going to affect future reactions. And so there is some type of, I'll just jump right in right now and answer that question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
There is destiny, but within destiny, there's free will. For example, you and I are on a plane to Hawaii. That's our destiny. We can't really get off that plane, but what we do on the plane, that's our free will. And some people can sleep on the plane. Some people can read on the plane. Some people can watch a horror movie on the plane. Some people can read enlightening literature on the plane. Some people get drunk out of their mind on the plane. So there's so many options within that karma. We have some karma that you oftentimes can't get out of. But what you do with what you got is what makes us a Mahatma, a great soul, or a Duratma, a problematic soul. So we're trying to recreate our future in our present, because we don't live in a bubble. Everything we do is sort of a vibration that goes outward, and not only are we affecting us, not only are we affecting us, we're affecting everybody around us. We're all like a big splash of energy going outward.
Yeah,
ripple effects. Yeah.
It's interesting too, because Vedic texts knew that well before modern science did. And now we have information in modern science really proving just how much of an impact we have on one another, even if we're not in super close proximity.
The more I've been around this Vedic studying, at first it seems, this is a novel little, it's looked at as not only a pseudoscience, but some like crackpot. Oh, reincarnation. Oh, telling the future. Oh, herbal medicine. Oh, whatever they can do to diminish it. And I think that the Western filter, the Roman Greco filter of reality has been cracked now. And they're realizing like we've diminished these cultures around the world in lieu of almost like a colonialism with our Western sensibility. But if you actually study the origins of math, like of algebra, of martial arts, of these Vedic arts of astrology, palmistry, medicine, music, they're not like a bunch of like Neanderthals whacking each other on the head with bones. This is a very sophisticated culture when it comes to language, music, art, ritual, spirituality. It's a massive encyclopedia, cannons of information, and they're all meant to bring you to higher states of consciousness. Exactly. When the Greeks were in their infancy, India was already had the biggest universities of the world, and it's it's only due to like Western like imperialism that we can get away with the arrogance that we just put out there.
Yeah.
If you're an Ayurvedic school, a sophisticated Ayurvedic school in America, it's like you got to get a accreditation from Harvard for anyone to give you. They've been doing Ayurvedic universities for millennia before Harvard was like a dream.
Yeah.
Why is Harvard or Oxford the gold standard of education? Give me a break.
Absolutely.
Why is as wonderful as Mozart and Chopin and Beethoven are, why are they the gold standard of what classical music is? You don't think Japan had classical music? South America had classical music. Classical music existed all over the world. We've just hearing everything with an information filter. And if we want to hear an objective understanding of reality, you got to zoom way out and see where Western culture was coming from.
Absolutely.
Greeks got a lot of their ideas from India in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, this astrology, when I tell people I'm an astrologer, it's interesting. And I think that everyone will have a different response, obviously, but I'm surprised at how people will look at it as like a party trick or something.
It's a party trick. Yeah.
It's a party trick. Like, well, tell me about myself. I was born November 7th. And I'm like, well, it's more complicated than that. I need more information, but Jyotish is the science of light. It's not a party trick. You know what I mean? It's something that is steeped in ages and ages and ages of scientific evidence that people
it's equivalent to like being an engineer, much more than a magician.
Right. And I think that it's been way oversimplified. Astrology has been as perceived in the West. And this when you get into Jyotish, it's not even just looking at your birth chart. It's looking at the divisional charts and the dashas and all of these different facets of information that can give us greater detail. And it takes lifetimes, not one lifetime, lifetimes to become proficient in it.
Isn't it interesting when you start looking at your life and that's why some people have these proclivities towards healing, the healing arts, because they've been doing it for lifetimes and they're attracted to it.
Yeah.
And just like you're attracted to this. And have you checked if it's from a previous life or not? Can you tell?
I mean, I try not to look at myself that way because I try to keep like a humility about all of it.
It's not humility though, it's math though. You know what I mean? That's the thing. If it says it from your previous life, it will say like, it looks like I was really interested in this type of thing in a previous life. So there is humility, but there's also reality too.
Right. No, it does. It does show that in my chart, and especially like meditation and spiritual seeking. That's really big. And I think that with the astrology, I mean, I pretty much came out of the womb being interested, and I have a mother who was also interested. So I got introduced luckily very young. And I think a lot of people listening probably have some sort of similar story, but you were talking about your life and how when you were writing about your life and reflecting, you were noticing that there was always a guide and always somebody there to help you. And for me, I've been so incredibly fortunate in that way when it comes to spirituality, but also astrology. I mean, I just bump into teacher after teacher who's willing to teach me things. And I think that that's one of the biggest blessings in my life for sure.
These are these karmic messengers, I'm convinced, that just keep on showing up in our lives. And I can really relate to that statement too. Like I was saying about writing the book, you see, oh, now this person is sent and now this person is sent.
Yeah. And I mean, even your relationship with Kaustubha, like when I listen to y'all have dialogue, I'm like, what kind of karma is this connection? Because it's just so special and so supportive. And I know that in the Bhakti tradition, having good associates is like one of the most important things we can focus on. And I really love the demonstration of y'all's karma and y'all's connection for sure.
Well, I think good company or good association. Kaustubha, if you don't know, is my partner in my podcast. And he was like an old friend. Like, we were in the punk scene in New York City in the early 80s, just walking the streets as teenagers. And then we both got turned into, we weren't really best friends, but we saw each other because it was sort of like a community of outcasts. So we knew who each other were. But then we both got attracted to Bhakti, and we both ended up living in ashrams, and then we became closer friends. And now we're 55. That was like when we were 15. It's unbelievable. But now we kept on. This is another interesting thing about karma and Jyotish. And, we travel in packs through lifetimes. Oftentimes you hear this there, that the child can become the father, or or a brother, or a twin, or a friend. And I know, like, I'm 55 this year, so it's like there's been people in my life I can't even get rid of them. It's just sort of like they're just people that they're in your periphery for 30 years and 40 years. It's like some karmic family you travel with, sometimes an enemy, sometimes a friend, sometimes a best friend, sometimes a lover, but they're intimate relationships or some type of relationship that you're not even trying to have, but they're wound in with you karmically. And it's super interesting to find their karma as well, to find their chart.
Yes.
And this is why this whole thing, it's just like, what you're happening is you're zooming out. And like we do that with Google Maps, is you go, okay, this is my apartment in New York City, zoom out. Oh, there's my block, zoom out. Oh, there's the city, zip, there's the country. And what you're doing that, here I am, Italian American New Yorker, zoom out. Okay, you got a family, and this is your part of the family you're in. Zoom out again. Oh, wow, there's your ancestry. Okay, zoom out. You know what I mean? Yeah. So we're seeing things in the biggest, broadest picture. And when we do that, one of the big benefits of this is that we start to see the puniness of the trivial things that we're going through, that we're blowing up and thinking, oh, my big problems. Oh, what I'm going through. We are like a speck. Even if our whole life was a life of pain, that is a moment. It's a blink of an eye in the picture of eternal time.
Yeah.
And so when you really zoom out like that, which astrology helps you do, you start to realize, oh, I get it. This is just some karma. I'm just burning off some karma, and I'm going to take responsibility for it. I'm not going to blame my situation. I'm not going to blame the president. I'm not going to blame the political party. I'm not going to blame the government. I'm not going to blame my parents. I'm not going to blame anymore. I got some karma. I got what I got. Now, what am I going to do with that? Yeah. I got what I got, or else I can live in the past pain or trauma and resent and hate. You can hate a parent. You can hate an uncle. You can hate, and people do with this, and they can't move forward in their life. They can't drive forward because they're always looking in the rear view mirror. This is how I've been hurt, and this is so unfortunate, and this is my story. And wait till and then I go to the therapist and I tell the therapist my story, and it just never ends. And they lock themselves into some patterns of the past instead of forgiving the past and saying, you know what? I don't know what I even did yesterday, what to speak of I did in my last life, but I got some karma. I have a student that he was really abandoned by his family. At a young age. And he just, I could tell it in his heart. He was hurt, had some bitterness towards them. And he got his chart done. And he said, boy, your parents really, really blew you off. Really. He goes, yeah. He said, they really just like abandoned you. And he said, yeah, exactly. He goes, it's like they had no care for you. He says, I finally feel heard. Mm-hmm. And he said, yeah, you know why? You were incredibly brutal to them in your previous life.
Wow.
And you're going to get it all back right now. So we may not want to think we got what we got because we deserved it. And people are like, how dare you say that? How dare, but everything is even in the material world. We don't know what we did. And even if you can't accept that, we should understand whatever karma we get, there is a benevolent hand, a benevolent energy, a benevolent force. Call it God, call it what you need. In Indian philosophy, they call it Ishwara, the controller. This 12-step program, call it your higher power. Judeo-Christian calls it God. Whatever you want to call some higher force, the force is benevolent, and the force is meant to bring us higher. Even though we suffer some trauma or tragedy, we have to learn from it, or else we get bitter. And if you get bitter, that means you didn't learn the lesson. We got to get better instead of bitter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So
I mean, that is so perfect, I think, that's a perfect message for astrology, for students of astrology, rather they be looking at their own chart or even a global chart, because we all have our own individual karma, like you're saying, things that we kind of come into the world with and that we're actively creating. But we also have a collective consciousness and a collective karma that we're creating and also like moving through in terms of the collective yuga and things of that nature. And so at the end of the day, we've just got to focus on our own actions and what we're creating today, and the energy that we're approaching it with, and the knowing that we're approaching it with. But we are at time, and I don't want to take up too much of your time.
well, let's just do it again.
Yeah, well, you have to come back because I want you to tell the palmistry story. I've heard you tell that a few times, and I was like, everyone on Astrology Now has to hear this story. So the next time.
Fantastic. There,
Okay.
I've got so many. It's been my obsession almost is the occult, and since I was a teenager, palmistry, astrology, or mystics. And there's these guys who also they're almost beyond. They know astrology, they know palmistry, but they're actually just mystics, and they're out there. They're real. They're real people. It's not just like reading some crazy book. People that can just look in your left eye and tell you all about your life, past, present, and future. And they go by the guise of I'm an astrologer, but they're not. And they tell uncanny things about your life that there's no way they can know these things.
It's amazing.
It is amazing. They can see if you're possessed or if you're haunted or if you're, and cultures all over the world always have these things.
Yep.
Christ talks about in the New Testament about possession and healing people. What we take as maybe even mental disorders oftentimes could be, according to these ancient traditions, a type of possession where a subtle entity enters your body. Sure, it manifests in a chemical imbalance. That's how it manifests with our modern instruments. But for a person who has the vision, they say, no, this person has another entity inside them, and it's causing them, to act different, speak different, think different, have the base, what we would call crazy or base desires. And so that's why a big part of yoga culture is a cleanliness of how we eat, of how we live, of our habits, of when we go to bed, when we wake up, how we do our meditation. Otherwise, degraded activities can lead to openings in our subtle body and allow disembodied spirits to enter. Now, sorry, I had to get all haunted now, but
go for it.
It's interesting stuff. Why not? What do I know? Just because I can't see it means it's not real.
Right.
But it's nice to open your eyes up to what's beyond our medical instruments. What makes us think we can figure out everything? What makes us think we can figure out sickness? And that's why a lot of great Ayurvedic doctors I've been to, they're also expert at astrology, because sometimes you realize, I have a bad liver and I'm suffering tremendously. I'm subject to jaundice. And they'll say, there is no herb I can give you. I can give you something, but until November 4th, you're going to be suffering with this.
Exactly.
There'll be hope to cure it after November 4th, because there's a malefic planet in your chart.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's also very interesting to see how you're also just burning some karma. What we call sickness is also burning some karma. And I can either be bitter about it. Why me? Why does this have to happen to me? I'm on vacation right now. This is unfair. Or I can say, this is a chance to burn off some karma. And while I'm here in this place, I'm going to meditate. I'm going to read sacred literature. I'm going to act appropriately. I'm going to treat people with dignity. I'm going to take care of myself. And this is how we actually change future karma.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I mean, I just feel like I could keep talking to you and asking you questions.
I know.
But this was great. I really appreciate your time, Raghunath.
Thanks so much. If people want to check out our podcast, it's Wisdom of the Sages, and you can get it wherever you get podcasts. Or if you want to hear trips I'm doing, you can follow me on Raghunath Yogi at Instagram, RAGHUNATH.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We do pilgrimages and take people all over the world. So definitely.
Yeah, we do pilgrimages, and we're doing one this year in February and one in October, which are magical in India. If you ever want to experience, you should come. Experience spiritual India. It's a real game changer. And then this year we're taking a trekking, which is like yoga, and we do kirtan, which is call and response singing. It's really call and response chanting. And that's going through the Himalayas in Nepal, the Annapurna range. So it's quite breathtaking and it's magical.
So amazing. Anyone would be so lucky to go. So definitely check out the website, check out Wisdom of the Sages, and hopefully we'll have you on very soon. And just thank you so much.
Looking forward, Christine. Keep up the good job. Haribol.
Haribol.